Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-combed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Well, hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, and this is episode 131, and I am so glad you're joining me today. We have quite a treat for you today. I have a special guest on. I have Anna from thehouseandhomestead.com. She's going to come on and talk to us a little bit about all the things she's doing and her journey into homesteading and all that. We love those kind of conversations, and I'll tell you what, she's doing it on a relatively small piece of land, and she is doing a lot. So I think you're really going to enjoy this. But before we jump into that, what's going on around here on the homestead? Well, it was a pretty productive weekend all in all. Had some fair weather, especially today. I was able to get outside and kind of clean up the aquaponics tank a little bit and get that going, and just clean up the yard a little bit and the garden a little bit, and just kind of start those preparations towards spring. And I really am getting excited about the spring garden. I can't wait to really get things going. We got a few things going in the greenhouse. There's some spinach and lettuce going on in there, but not a lot. I kind of took a little bit of a break through the winter growing this year and just didn't grow as much as I generally do in the greenhouse. But I'll be getting that all cleaned up and ready for some serious seed starting here real soon. But that's about it. I mean, we're doing just the cooking from scratch stuff and going through what we have preserved, and that's kind of this time of the year. You just start thinking about the next year. You're breaking out all the seed catalogs. You're looking through and getting all the ideas. I'm still kind of contemplating where I'm going to be putting everything and moving everything and the trees I'm going to be planting and all that this spring. But it's, it's going well. And this time of the year is, you're not doing as much with your hands, but you're doing a lot of thinking. You're doing a lot of planning. And that's a important part of homesteading. So I really appreciate this time of the year and the time you get to sit and do that before you really start digging in and doing the heavy lifting. So I'll tell you what, that's enough of that. Let's just jump right into this interview with Anna. Anna, welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad we could finally make this happen. We were scheduled a long time ago to be on, and for you to be on, and things happened.
Yeah, they sure did. This is amazing for me because I've been listening to your podcast. I think your podcast was the very first homesteading related podcast I ever started listening to when I very, very first started dabbling in this lifestyle, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know how long you have been on the air. Maybe I'm getting
that's about it. Yeah, it's about just the beginning right there. Yeah, I think it's about 5 years ago or so. Yeah.
I remember listening to it before when I'd be getting ready for work in the morning, and all I wanted to do was just be consumed with this whole lifestyle, and you and your podcast were my kind of little escape when I was still very much stuck in my old real world of going to work every day at a regular old job and not having a garden and all that stuff when I was still really stuck in the dreaming stage. So, yeah, it's kind of come full circle, which is cool.
That's kind of why I started the podcast, because I was in that dreaming stage, too, and I wanted to talk about it and be consumed with it myself. So I was right there with you. Well, you're doing some pretty cool things up there in your area, and I'll let you kind of talk about what you're doing. But first, before we get into all that, let's just, if you could, take a couple minutes and just tell us how you did end up going down this path and getting where you are.
Right. Yeah. So my husband and I both grew up in the city. We're both from Vancouver, BC originally. And in my, mid to late 20s, we were living together in a condo in a suburb of Vancouver. Pretty kind of standard suburban urban lifestyle, going to work in the city every day and bought all of our food from the grocery store, didn't grow anything. We had a north facing balcony. We could barely get herbs to grow. Like having a garden and raising our own food and all that stuff really wasn't even on our radar at this point. But we were just kind of, disenchanted with the lifestyle that we were living. We knew that there was just something that was missing. And I was going through a little bit of a hard time too. I went through, some bouts of anxiety and depression living in the city, and I just didn't feel right there. And I knew that there was something else, that there was something more. And around this same time, we actually started watching a lot of those Netflix documentaries, on where your food comes from, and just the, modern industrialized food system, and, pharmaceutical industry, and all these different things. And all these pieces sort of started coming together, where we were I felt like it was this awakening where we were going, oh my God, like this is a part of what's kind of contributing to us feeling this way. And then this is part of what's contributing to us feeling this way. And it's look at the food that we're eating, and look at this lifestyle we're living. And slowly we started to kind of put all the pieces together. And as we were watching those documentaries, they were also showcasing people who were opting out of this kind of modern consumer prepackaged, processed lifestyle that we were living. And we were watching these people and kind of this lifestyle that they were choosing instead. And a lot of them were choosing to kind of go back to the land and to live, a more natural lifestyle in rhythm with the seasons and with the land, and growing their own food. And some of them were living off grid, and all these things that were really, really new concepts to us. But we were just we were just enamored with this idea. And I had never considered before that was even a possibility for us. But all of a sudden, it's like a light bulb just went off, and I'm like, oh, this is it. And just thinking about, just dreaming about this, one day we could move out of here and we could have our own land. We could be growing our own food. And the idea of it alone was enough to just get me excited and to just get me out of this kind of funk that I was in. And that was kind of it. It was kind of full steam ahead from there. We started making plans almost immediately how are we, what's our plan? Where are we going to move? How are we logistically going to do it? Because I think it's easy to, have a dream, but if you don't have a plan, then it never really happens. And we were really serious about it. So we started making plans. We started researching where we might want to move to, because we knew that, staying in the city was just going to be impossible for us for what we wanted to do eventually with land and everything. We'd never be able to afford the kind of land that we needed to do what we wanted to do too close to the city. And so we ended up settling on a community on Vancouver Island, which is where we live now. So we are in now the Comox Valley, which is kind of in the mid-northern part of the island. And we did a lot of research, and we chose this area because there's a very strong local farming community here. Really, really big emphasis on sustainability and organic food. Our farmers market here is top rated. It's the best in our province. And so we knew that not only would we be moving to somewhere where we would have the option, the land available to us, and the option to actually start growing some of our own food and kind of transitioning to this more, slower pace, simpler homesteading lifestyle, but that we would actually be surrounded by a community of people who were interested in the same types of things. And so that's kind of where we settled, and we ended up moving out here. We made a plan, didn't happen overnight. But I think it took 3 or 4 years by the time all was said and done. We, got married in that time. I finished school. We actually honeymooned out here before we ever moved here, to kind of just to make sure that this is where we wanted to be. So we did a lot of research, a lot of planning leading up to it. And then we finally made our move, about 4.5 years ago, going on 5 years now. We moved over here. And the rest is kind of history. We can kind of get into the details of what that looked like in a minute. But yeah, we've been here now for 5 years, and every year we're kind of doing a little bit more and producing a bit more and learning a new skill and adding to our repertoire. And it's just, I feel like I'm home for the first time. And I know that may sound odd, but it's I felt like I was just living in the wrong place. Like I was just a square peg in a round hole where I grew up. And now I just feel like things are right with the world. I don't think I'd ever want to move anywhere else.
Oh, well, yeah, I can get that. I mean, I feel like I've always said, I feel like you can homestead anywhere, but there's no doubt that when you're in a community and around people who are doing it, who believe in that lifestyle and who will help you and just those kind of people, it would definitely be easier in that situation. And I don't think everybody can move to a place where they're surrounded by a community like that. But if you can, it's a really good thing.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm 100% on the same page. I think that you can homestead anywhere. And we are actually a living, breathing example of that, because like I say, when we started in the city, this didn't happen overnight. We didn't move here overnight, and it took a lot of planning and preparation, but we started learning some of the skills that we would eventually need while we were there. We started our first seeds. They didn't turn out very well because we really had no idea what we were doing, and we had nowhere to transplant them to after, but we did that. We started just doing a lot of the back end research on, we're taking books out of the library and just learning about this lifestyle and about growing food, and started, we had a kitchen, so we were able to at least play around with cooking from scratch. And I wasn't doing a lot of preserving at that time. I didn't learn how to can and do all that stuff until we moved out here and had an abundance of food that we had to learn to preserve. But, I started just being more conscious of where our food was coming from. So I would start shopping at our local, farmers markets and farms, and then I'd be buying things in season. And even if I was just freezing them, it was kind of this shift in my mentality of how I thought about, food, especially. Food is always at the heart of this kind of homesteading lifestyle, right? But just thought about where everything that we used came from, and what process it went through to get to us, and whether it was healthy to be putting in or on our bodies, and all these types of things. And so it was a slow mentality shift, and we started learning the skills that we would eventually need when we were still in the city, and it's snowballed from there. So it certainly didn't happen overnight, and I know we still have a long way to go, right?
Right. So I'm sure that's just made the transition easier in some sense, because you were doing some of those things where you were start at least research them and practice a few things. When you did get to your property, you were able to implement those things, and it was probably a much easier transition.
Oh, definitely. And that's what I always say to people. Like, if you want to start, just start now. There's always something you can do, and that's only going to help you later on. Like I said, we were doing, mostly stuff in the kitchen where we lived before, but, learning how to cook a lot of food from scratch made it so that when we moved on to our next property and we, we're growing our own food and everything, at least I already knew how to handle it when it came into the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And then when we moved here, we first lived on a rental property that we actually were renting for free, but in exchange for doing work on the house, because it was a 100-year-old house on about an acre of land, and it belonged to kind of a friend of ours. It was my husband's old boss at his old place, and they just so happened to have this place here. Him and his partner, who they wanted to move to, it was her grandfather originally built the place, and it had been sitting empty ever since her father had passed away. She had grown up there, and they wanted to move back here and renovate this farmhouse and everything. So they said, well, we've got this place sitting empty, and my husband does a lot of that type of construction and handyman work. So they said, if you would be willing to do some work on it while you're living there, it's just sitting there anyway, so you guys can live there. So it was really a win-win, but it was, a lot of learning in that house too. Nothing comes for free, quote unquote. When you're in a 100-year-old farmhouse, it comes with all sorts of issues that, that come up and that are unforeseen that you have to deal with. But it was a great place to start, and they allowed us to put in a small garden plot. And so that was the first place where we really started gardening and growing our own food. And they had a 100-year-old apple tree on that property. So we had no choice but to learn how to, start canning and things like that. So my very first canning project was applesauce, because we had probably, a few hundred pounds of apples come off that first year.
Yeah, so that's a blessing, though.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So again, we started learning all of those skills there, and that's where we really started putting a lot of these things into practice. But we were still working with a fairly small garden plot. And then just last year now we bought our first home, and it's on a smaller property. It's only a 1/4 acre, but the layout is just really good. We knew what we were looking for. And that was another thing, because we had been practicing and we've been, testing with different, within the garden space we were working with and all these things. We knew what we were after. And we found this place, and it had a large fenced garden area in the front where it was nice and sunny, and it had a greenhouse already here, and just a lot of really nice, good little microclimates around the property where we could grow different types of things. And it has got a hazelnut tree that's already established here. So there were some things in place. We've had to do a lot of work, but there were some things in place where we were like, yeah, we can make this work here. It wasn't just a suburban or urban plot. It was like, okay, yeah, it's only a 1/4 acre, but we can do a lot with this property. And just in the last year, last season we grew our biggest, most abundant garden ever. We got I didn't weigh it all out, but I'd say well over 1,000 pounds of food out of our garden, and are still eating through everything that we preserved. But again, we couldn't have done that had we waited to get the perfect property, and then started learning everything that first year.
Yeah.
So in here, we already at least knew what we were doing as far as starting our seeds and getting things in the ground and all these different things. And we had done a lot of trial and error already. So not that we didn't have some fails this past year, you always do, but we were able to really hit the ground running a lot easier than we could have had we been starting from scratch, right?
Absolutely. Well, I love it that you're on a quarter of an acre, because I talk to so many people who haven't started homesteading yet, right where they're at, and all they can think about is getting that, 20 acres or 10 acres, even 5 acres, and none of them would ever think about a quarter acre or anything less than an acre, really. And they just think that you can't homestead on a property that size. And wow, I've just met so many people that are doing so much on a property that size.
Oh, for sure. There is so much you can do, right? And I know that there's, I can't remember the name of the family that's down, I think in California, that's on like, isn't it
the Dervais family, yeah.
Yeah, right. And they're producing like 6,000 pounds of food or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's possible. Absolutely. Right. If you know how to kind of maximize the space and the microclimates that you have and all that kind of stuff. So we're probably thinking that realistically, we'll probably be here for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And we have a dream. We'd like to get a larger property at some point, and we'd like livestock and all these other things that, just won't necessarily be a reality where we are. But that's okay. We're not going to let that stop us from doing what we can where we are. And I think that's kind of the point to be taken out of this, right? Do whatever. You might not be able to do everything you want to do, but you can do something wherever you are.
That's right. That's great. Yeah, well, you're doing a lot. I've been following you on Instagram for quite a while, and I see a lot of the pictures you post and things like that. And you're doing a lot there. So you want to talk about some of the things you are doing on this little quarter acre property?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I say, we've got our big garden in the front, which was a scramble to get put in last year, because although it's nice and fenced off, which is really important where we live because we have a massive deer population who will come and mow down just about anything if you leave it out in the open. So that was already established and that was good, but the garden hadn't been touched in like over a decade. So we had to get in there last year with the excavator and the whole bit and like and there was rock walls and all sorts of, the people that were here before did a lot of gardening, but it was a lot of ornamental stuff. So it was just pulling a lot of old stuff out and getting everything prepped. And this was, by the time we got around to this, because we'd been working on renovating our actual house, it was April already. Like we were pushing, we had transplants that were like getting too big that had to get outdoors. It was a real push at the end to get everything ready. But we did it last minute. And like I say, we grew our most productive garden we've ever grown. So hopefully that wasn't just beginner's luck on this property. Hopefully we create that this year. But yeah, so growing a lot of our own food. And then also, like I say, we learned how to preserve. And in the old house, the first thing I did was learn how to can, just doing water bath canning and stuff like that. And then, now that's like, I can do that with my eyes closed. Right? Yeah. Now I'm moving on to pressure canning. I don't do a lot of it, but it's something that I'm kind of wanting to take on more this year. I have an old pressure canner and it works just fine, but there's something about it being old that just scares me still. Like crazy fear of this. So I would like to get a new one for my birthday this year. But then I've also learned how to, we've got a dehydrator, so we do that, and we ferment food now. And so all sorts of, I really love I like food preservation. It's just something that is really interesting to me. And I just love, I think most homesteaders know that feeling of like standing back and looking at a full pantry full of jars of food that you've preserved yourself. And there's just something that it's a feeling that I have not been able to get from anything else.
Yeah. It's a good feeling to see that food and know it's there and just kind of have it as a little bit of a security blanket in some ways, but also just being able to enjoy that great tasting food out of your garden.
Totally. Well, in this last month, I think you saw that on Instagram, I was running a pantry challenge. And so we do every January, we do our own version of a pantry challenge where we basically eat through whatever we've been able to put away. And we try not to use the grocery store, or we do so as little as possible. And we base all of our meals around the things that we already have on hand. And this year, I actually kind of put it out there to my audience. And I was surprised at how many people were really, really into it and like really excited about it. So we kind of ran with it, and we ran the Homestead Pantry Challenge on Facebook and Instagram, and that just ended yesterday. And I've just had so many amazing emails and messages from people who just got so much out of it. But it was really fun because we had been able to put up so much of our own food last year that, it's one thing to preserve your own food. It's another to use it.
Yeah.
And so it was just fun to get creative with the stuff that we were able to preserve and just come up with really just fun out of the box meals that we may not have ever tried had we, just always relied on being able to run to the grocery store for whatever we needed to complete a meal or whatever. So I think just that whole, like, the cooking from scratch, right? Even that, like, I never used to cook. I grew up in the city. Yeah, my mom cooked from scratch to a degree. I was never allowed in the kitchen, so I didn't do a lot. And, when I hit my 20s, my idea of cooking for myself was like putting some dry pasta in some water and opening a jar of sauce from the store. And like, that was adulting. I was cooking from scratch. Now it looks very different, right? But, so that's something that I still enjoy and that both my husband and I really like to continue to learn about and expand our kind of knowledge of food and food preparation and all this type of stuff. So we do, obviously a lot to do with food, but we also make a lot. Well, we also make a lot of our own products, I guess you would call it. Our necessities, our wants and necessities. On my end of things, pretty much anything that you can whip up in a kitchen is the kind of stuff that I do, even if it's not food. So things like I make my own candles, and I make my own, body products and body butters and sugar scrubs and healing salves, and I do herbal medicine, and really starting to just kind of get into that whole herbal medicine and that kind of thing now. But things like that. I'm not super crafty. I'm not good at like sewing and knitting and that kind of stuff, but anything I can kind of throw together in a bowl and whip up.
Yeah.
I do a lot of that stuff. So we've learned to now replace a lot of the things that we would normally buy from the store, cleaning products and all, cosmetics. I make my own toothpaste, like all sorts of stuff. So we're slowly, one by one, kind of replacing the unhealthier store-bought versions of things with healthier homemade natural versions. And then on my husband's end, he's very good with his hands. So he is the one that any type of building project or anything that we need, as far as anything that requires any type of tools, like he's on it. And so first off, we have a garage here that we converted into a rental suite. And that's kind of part of our bigger overall plan of becoming self-sufficient on our land, because now that we've done that, and he did that, he was the contractor for that, like he pretty much did every part of that. And now we're able to earn an income off of that, off that rental suite and earn an income from our land. And then, things like even just little things like he's, made rain barrels out of old garbage cans that now we collect rainwater in, and all sorts of little projects like that. So he honestly is probably my most valuable resource on the homestead. He can build pretty much anything, and that's helped a lot too. So we just kind of go by this general idea of trying to produce more and consume less, and learn how to, provide for ourselves as best we can without having to rely on outside help. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. It's one thing at a time, right? You got to take it slow, and we learn one thing at a time, and then we get that good, and then we move on to the next thing. So there's still a lot that we, buy, and a lot of outside help that we rely on. But, our overall goal is to work towards self-sufficiency one thing at a time.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you both have acquired some and have some good skills that work well for homesteading. I mean, him with his handyman abilities, and you being able to mix some ingredients together and make some things. So I would imagine that is your plan using those skills to turn that into some income at some point? Like you mentioned earlier that you have a great farmer's market on the island there. Is that something you're considering doing, like selling products like that in the farmer's market?
We're not sure at the moment. On the property that we're on now, probably not. It's just, it's a lot of work to try to make money off of selling produce, obviously, right? It's a lot of work to sell it. And even here where we have a really good supportive community, there's still the mentality by and large that like, why would I pay that much from the farm market when I can get it this cheap at Walmart?
Right, yeah.
Nuts. And like my mom's like that even, right? And I'm just like, it's hard for me. But I get it, right? When things are so cheap at the store, it's hard to justify sometimes spending the money if you're not necessarily informed and educated about what the difference is in those products, right? I feel like you always have to compare apples to apples, and that's not always the case with those two things, right? But so it's something we've thought about, but if that happened, it would probably be one day when we get a larger property and are able to produce a substantial amount of something that would make sense for us to sell. So something around here that would make sense for us that we've thought about is doing garlic, because garlic grows really well in our area. It's pretty hands off, right? Like you kind of just plant it and leave it in the ground for 9 months. And as long as you fed your soil correctly and everything, you can get a really abundant, harvest off of that with very little hands-on work, and it sells for a good price around here. So we've thought about it, but for now, our income basically comes from, I started my blog, right, thehouseandhomestead.com, a few years ago with the intention of turning it into a business, and it's still kind of in the works. I'm certainly not earning a full-time income off it, and everything I'm earning right now is going back, is being reinvested, but that's kind of the long-term goal with that. And then my husband left his job just over a year ago, and he actually lost his job. It was just unfortunate circumstances, but it kind of pushed him to start his own company, which he'd always wanted to do. And so now he runs a business called The Humble Handyman, and he does this kind of handyman work for people around town. And it's been pretty lucrative for him, because it turns out there aren't a lot of people who will take on a lot of the smaller jobs around here. Mm-hmm. And he's willing to take on all that stuff. So he's been able to do pretty well doing that. And then, like I say, we've got the rental property. So we've got a few different ways that we've diversified income right now and are able to either earn income from our land or earn it on our own terms, which is kind of part and parcel to this whole idea of being self-sufficient and ultimately working toward freedom, right?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like that's working out real well for you guys. I know a lot of homesteaders that kind of wish they could break away from the daily grind and kind of go down the path of doing things for themselves. And see, I didn't know how far along you were in that, but it sounds like you're doing quite a bit. Your husband and you both are definitely taking strides in that.
We are. Yeah, we're definitely goal oriented. So I can't stress enough how much this didn't happen overnight, right? Like it's really been one step at a time, and we've worked other jobs throughout the process. I still I used to be a teacher, and so I'll still go back and do, sub at the school some days to earn a little bit here and there. And, it's just, and even with the blog, right, I started it when I was on maternity leave with my daughter. And then I went back to work, right, and kind of continued it for a couple of years while I was doing that, and then decided that I was going to make a go of it full time and stay home and really work on it. And so, but it's been a years long process to get to where we are, and years from now, I'll probably look back at where we are now and go, oh my God, I can't believe how far we've come since then, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your blog. Let's talk about that for a minute and kind of why you decided to do that, start a blog, and even about homesteading, rather. Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I've always loved writing. Like it's who I am at my core. That's always, since I was a little girl, I was, writing and documenting everything. And when I graduated from high school, I actually decided to go into journalism. And so that was the first degree that I went into was a journalism degree. But that was also at the time when social media was just not even getting big. It was just becoming a thing. Like Facebook started when I was in university, right? And blogs started, like the very first blogs were just becoming a thing back then, right? We didn't even know what they were then, but it was changing the landscape of journalism. It was changing kind of the face of what it meant to be a journalist, and anybody could be a journalist at this point, right? Everybody had a smartphone they could take pictures on, anybody could just publish whatever. And so it kind of, the job market was really dwindling, and it was like, okay, am I really going to be able to make a living off this? And I didn't want to be like a reporter. That's not why I went into it. I wanted to write feature stories. And I discovered while I was doing my degree that I really like doing like how-to articles and stuff like that. Like I got a lot of joy out of it. I don't know why, but I liked it. And so, but I kind of put that to bed, and I decided not to pursue it as a job after school, just because it was really hard to find anything that was going to pay decently that I even half wanted to do. And then I went traveling for a bit, and that's kind of another piece of what ultimately led us here, but that's another story. But I went traveling for a bit. I worked in the travel industry. I was very much like living in the city, working downtown as a travel agent, jet setting all over the world for a few years. That was kind of this one point in my life. And then met my husband and, came home and settled down, and I was kind of over that. I knew I wanted to lay down some roots somewhere, and I was figuring out what I wanted to do with life and all that. And then I decided that I was going to pursue teaching. So I did that, and I got a lot of joy out of that, but it just, again, it didn't feel right. It wasn't like my calling, and I just knew that I wanted to write, but I didn't know what I wanted to write about. Like I just couldn't quite get there. And so when I was on maternity leave with my daughter, somehow it came up. I was reading something about blogging and about how people were earning money with their blogging. And it was the first time I'd ever even heard about this. And I was like, oh my God. So I could just create my own job doing what I want to be doing. I don't have to wait for somebody else to create it for me. And it was kind of in the same mindset of the whole homesteading thing. And, I don't have to wait or rely on somebody else to do things for me or to provide for me. I can do this myself. Mm-hmm. And so I just got really excited about it. And I just knew, I don't think there was ever a question of what I wanted to write about, because I just have such a passion for this lifestyle and for sharing it and talking about it. So I just knew immediately that it was like a light bulb again went off, and all these pieces of my life started to come together, where I was like, this thing that I'm passionate about in this homesteading and the writing and the documenting of things and sharing and the how-to articles, and all this kind of came together. And it's like right in that moment, I knew I need to start a blog. This is what I'm meant to do. And again, it's one of those things like moving over here where I've just never looked back. It's hard work. It is a lot of time and effort put into it. For, very little monetary reward at first, for sure, but it's such a passion project of mine that it doesn't even matter. I just love it so much. And I can't even, there's no more joy for me than when I get like emails back from people saying, thank you for the pantry challenge. We got so much out of it. Or thank you for this tutorial on whatever, or thanks, that was such an inspiration. Like it just, I love it. I get such a high out of it, I guess, right? That that's what keeps spurring me on to keep going. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I just want to spread this knowledge and with other people, and hopefully get other people on board with growing their own food. And if this is a lifestyle that they're wanting to move towards, to just get inspired to just start wherever they're at.
Well, I get it, because I tried to get away from it at one point here recently, and I couldn't even stop talking about it. It's like you can't stop talking about it. You can't stop writing about it. You just got to keep going with it once it starts, and it just kind of takes you over in a way. I mean, you're so into it, and you so enjoy the lifestyle that you want others to have that same joy of homesteading and be able to kind of go down this path if they're interested at all. So It's like me. You just want to help people go down that path if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to help people, but I also see it as contributing to the greater good in the world. Mm-hmm. Like for me, this is just something that I've had to do a lot of soul searching about this. I don't think I realized this at first. And it's really only been recently that I've really dug deep and asked myself, like, why? Like, what is at the core of why I'm doing this? Because to be honest, I've been on other podcasts before, and of course there's always this question, like, why did you start homesteading? And for some reason, it's been the hardest question for me to answer, because there are so many reasons. And actually, it was you that I think I remember that you were on Melissa K. Norris's podcast, because I was editing her podcast at that time. I was transcribing them for her. And I think it was you who said something about that if you think about homesteading like a wheel with spokes, and there's all these different spokes kind of leading to the middle, right? There's all these different avenues and skills to learn and things that are bringing you to this one place. And it so resonated with me, because that's how I feel about it. There's so many things that have led me here. Like I say, traveling was part of my story, and, growing up, just with my experience in the city, and I always just loved when I was somewhere more rural, or, this feeling of wanting to be somewhere, where I could live more in tune with the land, and then this learning about our food. And so all these avenues kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's great. You're doing some pretty good things over there. I mean, let's talk a little bit about your magazine that you're doing. I've really enjoyed that. I subscribe. I think I first heard about that you were talking about Melissa K. Norris's podcast, and I think I heard you talk about that on there, and I went and subscribed to it, and that's really good.
Yeah. So the magazine is another total passion project of mine. It's a free subscription right now. I'm thinking it's a lot of work, so it might not be in the future. Right, right now, it's a free magazine that comes out on the 1st of every month, and we kind of deep dive into a topic that's related to modern homesteading. So I've actually got the 6th issue coming out today, and the theme for February is, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, it's something called hygge. And it's a Danish concept of kind of cozy, comfortable living and how we can embrace seasonal living even in the darkness of winter and things like that. So that's my theme for this month. And then every month I interview an expert on whatever the topic is. So this month I had Kathy Lepsivik from Homespun Seasonal Living, who came on to talk about kind of embracing the dark days of late winter. And so that's my theme for this month. But we've also covered September was our preparedness issue. We've done fall gardening, herbal medicine, simple Christmas traditions. Our January issue is all about, how to rock a pantry challenge in January using the food that you put up. So it's just really fun for me because it allows me to go into topics a little bit deeper than you can on a single blog post, and just kind of provide people with kind of multiple resources to explore these topics in a little bit more depth and detail, and also being able to interview and speak with other people in this nation and has just been just so much fun for me, and to make those connections and to learn from other people and to kind of feature them. And then, like I say, I've always loved just writing and this whole idea of documenting things. So I have wanted to have my own magazine since I was a little girl. And then just like the blog, one day I was like, you know what? I can just do that. I don't have to wait for someone else to give me a job. I'm just going to make it.
Isn't technology amazing?
I know. So that's what I'm doing right now. And so, if you subscribe, then you'll get the current issue sent straight to your inbox. And you can do that at thehouseandhomestead.com/magazine. So right now they're free issues. So anybody who wants to sign up, now is the time, because they may not be free forever.
That February issue sounds like a whole new concept to me. So I'm definitely eager to check that out. I'll definitely want to see about that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes. So what else you have going on? I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but the course?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the course. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant to mention the course just because I don't have things set up quite yet. Like, I don't have a sales page ready. It's very much a work in progress. But the course it's called Seed to Soil, and I'm going to be kind of crafting it throughout this growing season. And I'll be teaching people how to start their plants from seed and plan out their garden and the crops that they're going to grow and everything, that are going to work best for the zone that they're in and their specific property and microclimates and everything else. And then how to start those plants from seed and raise them, into healthy, full-grown seedlings, and then actually transplant them and get them in the ground and give them a good, healthy head start in the summer garden. Because when I've surveyed my audience before, what I've found is that one of the kind of pain points is growing food, and especially from seed. And another reason why that is just because of time. People just don't feel like they have the time to do it, or to start them, to take care of them, to kind of baby these plants. But there's so much benefit to growing plants from seed rather than just going and buying seedlings from the store. And I've found ways anyway over the last few years to make it so that it's really not that time consuming. There's a little bit of time up front. There's a little bit of time, in caring for them as they grow. But as long as you know the basics of, how it works and what your plants need at different stages and everything, it actually can be a pretty painless experience. And it's so much, first of all, you save money, obviously. Yeah. Also just so much more rewarding when you know that you've grown something from seed, and you know that you had a hand in kind of every part of that process. And then of course, right, when you're growing from seed, you have so many more options available to you as well in terms of heirloom seeds and all sorts of things like that. So that's something that I'm passionate about, and that I know there's just a lot of people that struggle with that aspect of growing their own food. And so that's where I kind of want to start as far as offering an in-depth course. So that's what I'm going to be doing this spring. But yeah, I'm just kind of hesitant to talk about it because I don't have any people right now.
Well,
right?
we'll just let people know that they need to keep their eye out for it when it is done.
Sure. If that's something you're interested in, I am running it as a beta test, which means because the course I will be releasing videos as we go throughout the growing season, and showing you as we go. We're going to kind of go through the course together, how we're doing, how we're starting the seeds, how we're caring for them, how we're, providing the things they need, the light and all that stuff. And then all the way up until transplanting them. But because I have to do that throughout the growing season this year, and the videos won't all be ready right up front, and because I'm hoping to get feedback from people as well and improve the course as I go, I'll be offering it at half price for the only time ever. So it will be set at $79 US that's the plan for when I release it next year, full on. But so this year I'll be offering it for half that. So I think it's $39 for anybody who would like to sign up. And that's just basically in exchange for feedback as we go, so that they can have a hand in creating the course as well. So if you are interested in the Seed to Soil course, learning more about that, then you can email me at anna@thehouseandhomestead.com, and I can definitely let you know more about that.
That's great. Yeah, I know a lot of folks that want to grow their food from seed, and I think the thing that people have the hardest time with, it's been my experience that people have the hardest time with, is the hardening off process. From that time when they sprout to the time they actually to transplant, there's that middle time there where you have to harden them off and prepare them for that outside journey. And you can lose a lot of plants in that process.
So true. And that's what I've heard a lot too, is, I've started from seed, but they just die, and I can't figure out what I'm doing, and I just don't, and I think there's just, as long as you understand some key aspects of the process and how different plants respond to different things, right? Like not all plants can be started at the same time. Not all of them can go out at the same time. So learning a little bit about the intricacies of some of these, common garden vegetables and things that we're growing, and just what they need when they're in this more delicate baby stage of their life. It doesn't need to take any more time or effort. It just takes a little bit more knowledge about how it all works. So, yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot to offer there, because I know there's going to be some people that need that information for sure.
Absolutely. I know I did. And that's kind of the thing, right? I'm creating the course that I wish that I had when I was trying to figure this all out and spending hours researching online. And I don't know what it is about gardening, but there is so much conflicting information out there.
There is. You're right. Yeah.
And there's controversies about it, and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And it's just, right? So it's my version of kind of distilling down all these things that I've learned over the past few years, that had I known all this stuff in one easy to digest, course or format up front, I would have saved so much time and heartache in the process.
Yeah. You have to really weigh out how much your time is worth in investing in trying to find out and kind of shuffle through all that information out there. And if you can just find a place where you can trust the information and go with it, that's worth a little bit of money for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's great. Anything else that you want to talk about, or anything else going on that you think is important for folks to know about?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I was just thinking everything that I've had going on. So the Pantry Challenge just ended yesterday. The magazine's just coming out, and then the course I'm kind of getting really revving up this week. So I think that's enough for right now.
It sounds like that's enough. I mean, I'm not just...
the other thing too. So I have the blog, but I've started up a YouTube channel as well last year. So for anybody who's more of a visual learner, I've been doing a lot of tutorials on there that are a little bit more in depth, because I know that there's some things that are it's hard to learn them from a written blog post, right? And it's just easier to see them. And of course, YouTube is a great format to be able to do that and to go on for free and learn a few things. So I've got some great tutorials on there as well. And we're kind of working on building our little library of stuff on there as well. So you can find me on YouTube as well at youtube.com/thehouseandhomestead.
Well,
but yeah, I think that's kind of all the irons in the fire at the moment.
Well, that's a lot of irons in the fire. Well, I appreciate everything you're doing. I really do. I think you're doing some great stuff there, and I hope you'll keep up all that you're doing, and maybe you'll end up on that homestead that you really want with the animals in one day. Do you have any? I didn't even ask you. Do you have any animals at all right there on your homestead at the moment?
We don't have any livestock. We have a couple of real lazy house cats, and then we have 2 rabbits they're just pet rabbits. We had adopted one when we were still in the city that was abandoned at the shelter that I used to work at, and he's a big. We think, because he was abandoned, we don't know, but we think he's at least part giant Flemish. Like, he's a big bunny, a big white rabbit, and so we got him, and he kind of was our pet, and so we brought him here, but he's so big that he had to go outside in a pen. He just couldn't live in the house anymore. And he was lonely out there, so we got him a friend, a very big, we think also giant Flemish female rabbit. They're both fixed, so we weren't sure. We thought if they weren't fixed and they started producing baby bunnies, then maybe there'd be a business in that, but they didn't. But they've got, they're good companions, and they're just, for us, it's a good starting point because it gets us used to having this livestock, or not livestock that we're going to eat necessarily one day, but having animals outdoors that we need to provide bedding and food for and all that stuff, and having our daughter be able to grow up around them and get used to, tending to animals and things like that. But we do want to get chickens. We're hoping next year. We're hoping we're going to use this year to build up a chicken coop, and then we're going to bring in a flock of laying hens next year. And technically we're not allowed to because you have to be on at least an acre. But again, this is why community is so important. We are surrounded by really awesome people who totally support us getting chickens. And so we don't think we're going to have any issue.
That's great.
And our neighbors out back, they're on a little bit, I think they're on just over an acre, but it's very woodland. Like we're bordering the forest here. So it's not like open pasture or anything. They have a flock of, they have some geese, they've got ducks, they've got chickens. Actually, one of the ducks, he said he's gonna gift to us when it comes time to do so. So that'll be, having that kind of community too. We will often trade with our neighbors. We give them seedlings that we start, because I always start way too many, and we give them produce out of our garden, and then they trade us for eggs and for meat. And so having that community has been really great. So even though we don't have our own livestock yet, we border on a property with somebody who does. They've had pigs. He even said he had a cow in their front yard at one point for a few weeks, right? So, having those connections. And there's someone else, actually, another one of my friends who they raise meat. They raise pigs and a bunch of different things, but she wants to start a garden this year. So she has asked, if you can help me come and plant out my garden, we can trade you some meat. Would that work? So I love this whole trading and bartering community within the homestead world. That's a
great community you have there. When, and just having that community local and having an online community is just so important. I mean, just having that support around you all the time. That's great.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your passion for homesteading and your passion for helping others to kind of learn their way in this lifestyle. And I think you're doing some great stuff there. And I just really appreciate you coming on here today and talking to us about it.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, that was a great interview with Anna. Thank you so much again, Anna, for coming on and sharing all that with us. She's just doing an amazing amount on that little property there. And that just goes to show you don't need a huge property. I mean, I've been talking about it for years. Most of you know that I'm on a pretty small piece of property myself, and that I'm able to do quite a bit. She's doing a lot on a small piece of property. Don't let the size of your property determine whether you can be a homesteader or not. You can do it right where you're at right now. So just get started doing some things. There's so much you can do. And I'll make sure I get all the information for Anna's her magazine and her website and her YouTube channel in the show notes for you. So definitely go check that out. I know you're going to enjoy everything she's doing there. So give her a follow. Also, I wanted to let you guys know that if you're a big fan of the podcast, you're going to enjoy what I've got coming up. I have decided I'm only going to go every couple weeks with a full episode. But what I'm going to do is twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday, I'm going to do something called 5 Minutes on the Modern Homestead. And it's going to be just these little short 5-minute episodes, just 2 days a week on, again, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So there'll be basically 4 of those in between regular full episodes. So I think that'll be nice. You'll get that little kind of kick of inspiration. And I just want to cover briefly just a lot of topics. And I've been kind of recording those and pumping those out. So I'm trying to get several ahead so I have a bunch ahead and I can just kind of keep ahead with it and always have a couple a week for you guys to enjoy and be inspired by. So I think you're going to enjoy that. I've kind of had fun making them. So I think that they're going to be good for the podcast. So definitely check those out. I'm going to blend them right in with the regular episodes. I'm going to number them as podcast episodes, but they're going to be these little mini episodes. Like I said, 5 minutes. So I think you'll enjoy that. I mean, I know a lot of you like those big long episodes because you got long commutes and things, and we're still going to do that. But those are just going to come every 2 weeks, and we're going to do these others in between. So that's what's coming up for the podcast. And we're coming up on our busy season, folks. We're coming up on that time of the year when we're going to be really working hard in those gardens, getting those gardens ready. And I'm looking forward to that time of the year and talking a lot about it, and right along with you being out there doing it. So, and I also wanted to remind you that if you are new to this lifestyle, if you're not yet started or maybe just started and you're looking for a book with some good information on just getting started, the ins and outs of what homesteading is, how to evaluate your property, those kind of things, I wrote a book called From Home to Small Town Homestead. It basically talks a little bit about my journey and then how to kind of get going on a small property, especially if you're on a small property, kind of how to evaluate that property and get started going. So you can find that. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And it's really, I think, a good book for beginners. If you're more advanced, you're into it, you probably don't need this book. It really is the basics of just kind of getting started. I mean, there might be some things in it that would help a person kind of take things to the next level, but it's really, I wrote it for beginners because, I have a passion for that. I don't want people to be in the same boat that I was in for so long and just putting it off. Start now, start where you're at, get going with it, and that book can help you. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to chatting with you again. Until next time, happy homesteading, and God bless. I hope you enjoyed this episode. To learn more or find more episodes, just head on over to HaroldThornbrough.com. Thanks for listening.